Fictitious names. I'm 34 years old and married to the love of my life, Michelle, who is 31. We've been together for 13 years, 11 of which we've been married. Michelle has a chronic illness that, while not terminal, significantly impacts her quality of life. Since we started dating, I always knew I would do whatever I could to support her. So, as soon as our finances allowed it, I suggested she quit her job and stay home, prioritizing her health and well-being. Fortunately, in recent years, my career has been going very well. This has not only given us financial stability, but it has also allowed me to encourage Michelle to get out of the house and engage in hobbies we couldn't afford before, either due to lack of money or because she simply didn't have the energy to enjoy them. Seeing her take cooking classes, paint, or even try things like golf fills me with pride. Her physical and mental health has never been better.
At home, we divide tasks based on how Michelle is feeling. On days when she has more energy, she usually takes care of almost everything before I get home from work. But when her illness flares up, many of those responsibilities fall on me. And honestly, I don't mind. It's not like there's too much to do. Laundry, dishes, cooking, and taking care of our dogs. Besides, we have a housekeeper who comes once a week and handles the heavier tasks. Personally, I enjoy cooking, and on days when Michelle can't do anything, I usually take care of everything in about an hour, tops. Beyond household chores, I've always enjoyed spoiling her. I like surprising her with small gifts, taking her on dates twice a week, and planning vacations together. Seeing her happy is my greatest satisfaction. But this is where my sister, Karen, comes into the picture. She has never understood my way of being with Michelle. Karen is married to Bill, who works in the same industry as I do and earns a similar salary. However, Bill doesn't treat Karen the way I treat Michelle. He insists that she works, even though they could afford for Karen to be a stay-at-home wife. Additionally, Karen constantly complains that Bill rarely takes her out to dinner, doesn't buy her flowers or thoughtful gifts, and doesn't share his money as their money. Despite all this, Karen always criticizes my wife. When I mention that Michelle is taking a cooking class, painting, or playing golf, Karen responds with sarcastic comments about how spoiled my wife is and how surprising it is that she stays busy. If I say I had to take care of a household chore because Michelle wasn't feeling well, Karen insists that Michelle is selfish for not doing her part. Even if I mention that I bought Michelle emerald earrings, gave her a spa day, or prepared a special recipe for her, Karen immediately comments that our relationship is unbalanced and that Michelle is taking advantage of me. The situation came to a head recently at a family dinner. Neither Bill nor Michelle were present. I casually mentioned to my mom that after dinner, I'd need to do a load of laundry to have clean pants for work the next day. Michelle was experiencing a severe flare-up and had been confined to the couch all day. Karen, as always, didn't miss the chance to criticize. She scoffed and loudly said, "If you didn't spoil her so much, you wouldn't come home to so many chores." That was the last straw for me. I responded, probably more bluntly than I should have. "My wife isn't spoiled. Your husband just doesn't love you." And I added, "Why are you still working if Bill earns as much as I do?" The room went silent. Karen was furious. My parents were visibly upset. And shortly afterward, I was asked to leave the dinner. Since then, Karen hasn't stopped sending me messages full of insults. My mother also contacted me, saying that my words were insensitive and that I should apologize. Now I'm left wondering, was I the bad guy in this situation? Update 1. First of all, I want to thank everyone who took the time to read my story, share their opinions, and offer me advice. Honestly, I didn't expect so many responses, and reading your comments has given me a lot to think about. From those who supported me to those who pointed out possible flaws in how I handled the situation, I value every point of view. After reflecting quite a bit, I decided that the most sensible thing to do was to try to talk directly with Karen. It's clear that there are unresolved tensions between us, and even though our approaches to life and marriage are very different, I think it's important to try to understand each other before this situation further deteriorates our relationship as siblings. So last week, I called her to invite her out for coffee. My proposal wasn't met with much enthusiasm. In fact, Karen was quite cold at first, which didn't surprise me given what happened during the family dinner. Even so, I insisted that I wanted to talk face to face because deep down, I still want us to have a healthier relationship. She agreed, but not without throwing in a sarcastic comment. I hope you're not coming with a sermon on how to handle my marriage. On the day of the meeting, I arrived a few minutes early at the cafe, hoping to have a moment to calm my nerves. When Karen arrived, she was clearly on the defensive, arms crossed and a look that said, "Let's get this over with quickly." I decided to get straight to the point. I explained to her that I hadn't arranged this meeting to criticize her or compare her to anyone, but because I care about our relationship and wanted to clear up some misunderstandings. At first, Karen was resistant. She insisted that I had humiliated her in front of our parents and that my comment about her husband had been cruel and out of line. I'll admit that hearing this made me feel a bit guilty because I recognized that my response at dinner wasn't exactly diplomatic. So I apologized for the tone I used, but also explained that I felt her constant criticism of Michelle and our relationship had pushed me to my limit.
This is where things got more interesting. For the first time, Karen didn't respond with sarcasm. Instead, she started talking about how difficult it has been for her to deal with the constant comparison between her marriage and mine. She said that, even though it might not seem like it, she admires the way I treat Michelle, but at the same time, it makes her question why her own relationship with Bill isn't the same. She confessed that she feels frustrated because Bill doesn't share the same values as I do when it comes to small details or spending quality time together as a couple. "It's like we live on different planets," she said. Hearing that made me think. While it doesn't justify her hurtful comments toward Michelle or me, I believe this conversation was the first step in understanding where those criticisms come from. I told her that I understand that comparisons are inevitable in families, but rather than turning them into a competition, we could use them to support each other. I also reminded her that not everything that looks perfect from the outside really is. Michelle and I have gone through difficult moments that no one else knows about. By the end of our conversation, Karen seemed calmer. I'm still not sure if this will solve all our problems, but at least, for the first time in a long while, I felt like we really listened to each other. Before leaving, we agreed to try to be more respectful of each other's life choices, even if we don't always agree. I know this is just the beginning. Changing deeply ingrained family dynamics isn't easy, but I'm willing to try. And although Karen didn't explicitly say it, I think she's also willing to make an effort. Only time will tell if this dialogue will bear fruit.
Update 2.
As I shared in the last update, I met with Karen to try to clear up the tensions that have arisen between us. To be honest, I went into the conversation prepared for it to be difficult, and I wasn't wrong. Although we ended on good terms, it wasn't an easy road to get there. It all started with a pretty direct confrontation. Karen didn't waste any time and said to me almost immediately that she couldn't understand why I was so intent on defending Michelle when, according to her, Michelle clearly has the better end of the deal. I stayed quiet for a moment because I wanted to choose my words carefully. Finally, I said something I had been thinking about since this situation began to escalate. It's not about who has the better end, Karen. It's about how we choose to live our lives and what kind of relationship we want to build with our partners. That seemed to disarm her a bit. For the first time in a long while, I saw a hint of vulnerability on her face. Karen let out a heavy sigh and said something that surprised me. "It's just that I don't understand why Bill isn't like that with me. I know I shouldn't compare, but when I see how you take care of Michelle, I can't help but feel envious." That was the first time Karen openly admitted what I had already suspected. Her constant criticism of Michelle and me was nothing more than a projection of her own dissatisfaction with her marriage. She told me she has tried to talk to Bill about how she feels, but that he simply doesn't see it as a problem. For him, as long as he pays the bills and is a good provider, he's doing his part. Karen, on the other hand, wants something more. She wants to feel that her husband values her, not just as a life partner, but as a person. As I listened, I couldn't help but feel some compassion for her. It's easy to judge someone when all you see is their critical and sarcastic side, but in that moment, I realized that Karen wasn't being malicious. She was simply dealing with her own pain in the worst possible way. I told her that I understood her frustration, but I also reminded her that her comments about Michelle and me weren't fair or productive. Of course, the conversation wasn't entirely smooth. Karen has a strong personality and doesn't like admitting when she's wrong. There were moments when she tried to justify her words, saying things like, Well, it's hard not to comment when I see how you do everything, and Michelle seems to do nothing. I explained once again that Michelle's situation isn't something she can control, and that, while I take on more responsibilities at home when she's unwell, I do it because I love her and want to make her life as manageable as possible. After a lot of back and forth, Karen finally acknowledged that she had been unfair to Michelle and me. She didn't use the word sorry, but she did say something that I consider an important step. I guess I should try to understand your perspective better instead of criticizing. For Karen, that's about as close to an apology as I've heard in years.
Before we ended our meeting, we agreed on two things. The first is that she would try to be more mindful of her words and avoid making disparaging comments about Michelle or our relationship. The second is that I would commit to not making hurtful remarks about her or her marriage, even if I feel attacked. Essentially, we decided to set clearer boundaries to avoid future conflicts.
Since that conversation, things have been relatively calm. I can't say that Karen has completely changed. She still has her sarcastic tone every now and then, but she's no longer so focused on criticizing Michelle. On my part, I'm trying to be more patient with her, remembering that her attitude often comes from a place of insecurity rather than malice.
One interesting change I've noticed is that Karen has started asking questions about how we handle certain things in our marriage. For example, she asked me what kinds of activities might help her reconnect with Bill. I suggested that she try planning something together, like a weekly outing, even if it's something simple like going out to dinner or taking a walk in the park. I don't know if she'll actually do it, but the fact that she asked seems like a good sign. Update 3. The call was to tell me that she had talked to Bill, her husband, about how she feels in their marriage. This left me shocked because Karen has always been the type to keep things to herself or let them out as sarcastic comments, but rarely confronts problems directly. She told me it was a difficult but necessary conversation. She explained to Bill that she feels ignored and wants to work together to improve their relationship. The craziest part? Bill agreed. Yes, you read that right. The guy who always seemed so indifferent said he was willing to try something new. Karen confessed to me that this was the first time in years that she felt like Bill really listened to her. They are still far from being the perfect couple, but she feels it's a good start. She even told me that they're considering going to couples therapy, something that, to be honest, I never thought Bill would agree to. Hearing this left me with mixed feelings. On one hand, I'm happy for them. On the other, I wonder if all this drama could have been avoided if Karen had addressed her problems with Bill instead of venting her frustrations on Michelle and me. Speaking of Michelle, things with her are going well, thank God. Her health has remained stable, which is a huge relief for us. We still have bad days, obviously, but I feel like we're getting better at handling the situation. She's also noticed the changes in Karen. Recently, Karen came to our house to have coffee and chat, and Michelle was having a good day, so she joined the conversation. It was strange, in a good way. Karen didn't make a single sarcastic comment or indirect remark. She even complimented our house decor and said Michelle has great taste.
Who is this Karen, and what did they do with the original one?
Beyond that, Karen seems to be making efforts to improve other areas of her life. She told me she started taking pottery classes. This surprised me because I always thought Karen was one of those people who would mock anything remotely creative. But no, it turns out she had always wanted to try something like that but never gave herself the time. She sent me pictures of her first pieces, and while I'm no expert, I think she's doing pretty well. She told me the idea came to her after seeing how much Michelle enjoys her hobbies, which I thought was a sweet detail. Another change I've noticed is how Karen interacts with me. Before, every time we talked, I felt like she was on the defensive or ready to criticize me. Now, although we're not super close, our conversations are much friendlier. She's even asked me how Michelle is doing, something she rarely did before. I'm not saying everything is perfect, but there's definitely been an improvement. One thing I want to highlight is how this has affected our family overall. My parents, who were initially upset with me over what happened at the dinner, now seem more relaxed. My mom told me she noticed that Karen seems calmer and even looks happier. That makes me feel good because while it was never my intention to cause family conflict, I also knew something needed to change.
Update 4.
First of all, I want to thank everyone once again who has followed this story and shared their thoughts, advice, and encouragement. Honestly, this community has helped me see things from different perspectives and handle this situation in a way that, truthfully, I don't think I could have managed on my own. So, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Today, I want to share how things are 3 months after that initial post. Honestly, I'm surprised by how much the family dynamics have changed since then. I won't say everything is perfect, but there's definitely progress, and that's already a huge relief. I'll start with Michelle. She and I continue to enjoy our life together, probably more than ever. Her health has been quite stable over the past few months, which is an enormous blessing for both of us. We try to make the most of every day, especially now that we can plan things without worrying so much about unexpected setbacks due to her condition. In fact, we've been organizing a trip for next spring. It's something we've always wanted to do, but for one reason or another, it never happened. This time, we don't want to postpone it any longer. We're still deciding on the destination, but it will probably be somewhere quiet and sunny, perfect for disconnecting and recharging.
What excites me most about this trip isn't just the idea of exploring a new place, but the fact that Michelle is excited about it. For a long time, any plans like this seemed out of reach because of her condition, but now I see her enthusiastic researching activities and things we can do together. It's a huge change, and it makes me feel more grateful than ever for how far we've come.
Now, regarding Karen, I have to admit that things have improved much more than I expected. As I mentioned before, after our conversation, she and Bill decided to work on their marriage, and it seems like it's paying off. Karen told me they've been attending couples therapy, and although it hasn't been easy, they feel like they're making progress. I was surprised at how honest she was when she told me that, at first, she doubted Bill would truly commit, but to her surprise, he has been actively participating. He's even started being more considerate toward her, something Karen wasn't used to.
One example of this is that, a few weeks ago, Karen called me excited to tell me that Bill had prepared a surprise dinner for her at home. According to her, it was the first time in years he had done something like that without her asking. Sure, it's not something monumental, but for Karen, it meant a lot. Hearing her talk with so much emotion and hope was honestly a very heartwarming moment. It made me realize that, despite all our differences, I really do want her to be happy.
As for our relationship as siblings, it continues to improve. Karen and I now talk more often, and our conversations are much more relaxed. We've even joked about some of the tense moments we had before. The other day, when I mentioned that I was planning the trip with Michelle, Karen jokingly said, "Well, I hope you bring me back a fridge magnet since I'm your #1 fan now." It was a small comment, but a meaningful one because it shows she's moving past her critical and negative attitude. I've also noticed that Karen is getting closer to Michelle. Recently, when Michelle posted a photo of one of her painting projects on social media, Karen left a comment saying how much she loved how it turned out. It might seem trivial, but coming from Karen, who used to rarely acknowledge anything positive about Michelle, it's a big step. Michelle noticed it too and said to me, "Did Karen really say that? I think things are changing." Of course, not everything is perfect. There are still moments when Karen seems to fall back into old habits, especially when she's stressed or tired. But now I'm better able to handle it, and I feel like she's also making an effort not to let her negative emotions take over. It's a process, and I understand it will take time, but at least now I see that there's genuine effort on her part.
My parents have also noticed the changes. My mom, who was initially upset with me over what happened at the family dinner, recently told me she's happy to see that Karen seems calmer and that our relationship is improving. She even joked, saying, "It's about time my kids stopped fighting like teenagers." It was a comment that made me laugh because while she's right, it also reminded me that all this drama didn't just affect Karen and me, but the whole family. In summary, I feel like we're in a good place now. Not perfect, but definitely better. Michelle and I are happy, Karen and Bill are working on their relationship, and as a family we're starting to rebuild bridges that seemed burned. I know there will be more challenges in the future because that's life. But now I feel like we have the tools to face them in a healthier way. And well, this might be the last update unless something noteworthy happens. But for now, I can confidently say that we're doing well, and that for the first time in a long while, I feel optimistic about the future.
AITA for telling my sister that my wife isn't spoiled, her husband just doesn't like her.